She grew up in Lebanon when Lebanon was a Christian country. That's, of course, the country that neighbors Israel due north and borders the Mediterranean. Good morning, Bridgie. Welcome to our program. I'm Tim with Ed.
Good morning, Tim and Ed. Thank you.
Thank you for being on with us again. We want to talk to you obviously about this latest situation in Boston, but before we do, I wanted a lot of Americans may not know the history of Lebanon, and I think that's very interesting because Beirut, has I guess for 30 years now been known as a place of turmoil, and we know the Marines that died there when Reagan was president by that bombing. But before that, Lebanon, going back how many years, had a great history of being a very progressive, modern, even a vacation resort for many people.
That's correct, but that's when Lebanon used to be a Christian country before the Islamic takeover of Lebanon. Most people don't realize, Tim and Ed, that Lebanon used to be the only majority Christian country in the Middle East. We were open-minded, we were fair, we were tolerant, we had open border policy, we welcomed everybody into our country because we wanted to share with them the westernization which we had created in the heart of the Arabic world. Many Muslims used to send their children to study in our universities because we had built the best universities in the Middle East. They graduated and worked in our economy because we had built the best economy in the Middle East, even though we did not have any oil. Beirut became known as Paris of the Middle East, the banking capital of the Middle East. Unfortunately, all that began to change because 20, 30 years after we got our independence from France in the 40s, the Muslims became the majority simply because of the way they multiply. While we Christians have 2 or 3 children, and from the time they're born, we start thinking about what college we're going to send them to, what education we're going to give them. The Muslims, on the other hand, have multiple wives and many children. And so by the 70s, the country, once the Muslim population became the majority in the country, that's when they rose up and began massacring and killing the Christians, and basically changed the face of the country. And this is why Lebanon went from being 67% Christian to today about 20%.
Wow. That's staggering. And you know what else, Brigitte, it brings to mind is the goal. The goal of Islamists is, whether through the sword, as happened in the foundational years of Islam, or by, population, or by immigration, they seek to become the ruling majority in a nation, and when that happens, it begins to swing towards Sharia law, and if you don't go along with the plan, you are placed in a basically a situation where your life is in danger, because that open border policy for Lebanon, did it not result in terrorists moving into Lebanon and from there beginning to do the work of taking over?
Exactly. And not only terrorists, but when regular Muslims, not radical Muslims, when regular Muslims came to our country and became the majority, they wanted their own ways implemented. They operated very differently. There was a fundamental difference in the way we live and carry ourselves, a different set of values, a different set of value on things. For example, educating of women. While Christians send their daughters to school just like their boys and gave them an education, Muslims frowned on the education of women. So we started seeing truly the change of the landscape of the country from being a very progressive, open-minded, modern country. And I mean modern by thinking. I'm not meaning, big buildings and tall buildings. I mean, if you want to look, if that exemplifies modernization, I mean, look at Abu Dhabi and Dubai. You've got all the wealth in the world and all the big buildings, and but that does not mean civilization. That does not mean democracy. That does not mean open thinking and open-mindedness. the way we know what open-mindedness and democracy and freedom in the West is. And the unfortunate thing, Tim and Ed, is while this was happening in Lebanon, the transformation of the country in the 70s and 80s, while we Christian Lebanese were crying out to the world to come save us and see what's happening in Lebanon, the world didn't really understand. They called it the civil war. They couldn't understand the war. They would talk about the war in Beirut, but nobody really wanted to discuss exactly what was happening to the Christians. And because the majority of the media, which was very liberal, was based in West Beirut, the area that the Islamists control, the only news that came out of Lebanon was basically news that was approved by the Muslim groups. So the story of the Christians and the Islamization of the country was not coming out to the airwaves the way it should have been, and that's why we have what we have today in Lebanon. And we're seeing this happen in Europe, and now this is coming to the United States as well. It's just a matter of time.
What is at your website? What is your website and what's there?
I came to the United States in 1989, and I thought I left the crazies behind. September 11th changed all that for me. It made me realize that the crazies are here. So after September 11th, I launched Act for America. actforamerica.org. We are now the largest national security grassroots organization in the United States. We have over 250,000 members, 780 chapters nationwide with a full-time lobbyist on Capitol Hill. What we are creating is basically the NRA of national security. We are creating a powerful organization made up by good Americans, patriotic Americans who care about this country and care about preserving our Judeo-Christian value system, which is the foundation for our Western civilization, and start speaking out and putting pressure on our elected officials to throw political correctness in the garbage where it belongs and start calling a spade, and do what is right by the American public by introducing laws and legislation that will protect America and Americans in our own communities. And I believe, Tim and Ed, that now more than ever, this is the time when Americans need to be involved. So I encourage everyone listening to this broadcast to go to our website, actforamerica.org, and sign up to receive our emails and action alerts. Find a chapter in your community and get involved. And if you can support us financially, we need your support. Go and get involved.
We're talking to Brigitte Gabriel, Act for America. I'm Tim Wildman with Ed Vitagliano. Brigitte grew up in Lebanon, moved to America. She explained the last few minutes how Islamic takeover of Lebanon just ruined the country, basically, and it's not anything like it once was, known as the Paris of the Middle East, of the Mediterranean. I want to talk to you there's several things I want to talk to you about, but I was hearing a discussion the other day on, I think it was Fox News, O'Reilly, and he was having on a liberal and a conservative, and they basically were agreeing that this was a real problem, the obvious, that is Islamic jihadism. But the question came up, and I would like your opinion on this, is why does the secular left in this country, and including the politically correct subscribers like President Obama and such, why do they seemingly align themselves with or apologize for a ideology, in this case Islamism, or that is anti everything that the secular left says they stand for, i.e. women's rights, the homosexual agenda, all these things.
Abortion rights,
all these things that they say they champion, they stand for, are opposed by the Islamists, and that's some of the reasons why they do the murdering and the maiming. At least they claim that, and they are against, the traditional Americans. That is the secular left. They're on the side of these people. They apologize for these people who are trying to kill us. So can you explain that oddity for me?
Great question. And it's very simple, because Islamic groups focused on going and recruiting from the secular community in America to bring them to their side. And what I mean by that is, I discuss in my book, They Must Be Stopped, a plan that was written by the Muslim Brotherhood for the United States in 1991, in May 22nd, 1991. And it became known in the intelligence community as the Muslim Brotherhood Project for North America. And in the Muslim Brotherhood Project, they talk about how to infiltrate America and sabotage America from within, using our own hands in order to destroy our country. And what makes the project so unique is they give tactics and proposals as to how to infiltrate and dominate America. And one particular line that refers to the progressive is they talk about how to reach out and work with like-minded organizations, basically organizations that loathe their country and apologize for their country, etc. And they talk about how to reach out and work with like-minded, quote, progressive organizations that share similar goals, meaning the resentment against the country, etc. And this is why, with a very clear focus, Islamic groups that are front for the United States in the United States, such as CARE, the Council on American Islamic Relations, ISNA, the Islamic Society of North America, the MSA, the Muslim Student Association, and others, have focused on working with the left and basically telling them that Islam is wonderful and we are all friends, and, you need to stand up for us because we are the downtrodden and we are the underdog and everybody's against us, and you Democrats and secularists need to stand up with us against these prejudiced Republicans and conservatives who are coming out against us. And basically, what the ACLU and these progressive organizations have done is, by aligning themselves with CARE and ISNA and these Islamic organizations, have become the useful idiots at the hands of the Islamic movement with an agenda that is very organized and very focused, that is using these leftist organizations and these secularists, especially those in the media, in order to blind our patriotic Americans from learning the truth, in order to lead them into a completely different direction and change their focus from basically looking at what's threatening us and identifying it by name to basically looking in another direction and running in circles trying to figure out, what's attacking us. And, it couldn't be these nice Muslim, wonderful people who are our friends. It couldn't be them, because CARE and ISNA and all these organizations told us that Islam is wonderful and it's a religion of peace, and jihad basically is Islamic yoga. So that couldn't possibly be the source of all this terrorism that's coming to our country.
Well, Brigitte, the problem is that you use the phrase useful idiots. If I'm not mistaken, that was first used by Vladimir Lenin to describe those intellectuals and academics who sided with the Bolshevik Revolution. The problem when you have a totalitarian ideology like this Islamist movement is they'll use the useful idiots until they take power, and then the useful idiots are the first ones to get bumped off. I mean, this happened in communist country after communist country. The intellectuals who supported, the communist movement were the first ones sent to the concentration camps. So, I mean, is this something that the media and the political left, are they missing something here in terms of what normally happens to useful idiots?
Exactly. They are not learning from history. And listen, this happened again and again in Lebanon when the Muslims and Palestinians, who also are Muslims, began massacring the Christians. The Christians would tell them, you can't massacre us. Some Christians would say to them, we demonstrated with you, we fought for your rights in government, we represented you in our court system. You can't kill us, we are your friends. And the Islamists would look at them and tell them, you are nothing more than filthy infidels. You are no better than the other infidels we're killing. You were used in order for us to advance our cause. But by the time these leftists woke up, it was too late for them to change the tide in the country. We heard stories as they escaped into our towns as the last refuge, those who made it out alive to tell us these stories. But by that time, it was gone. The same thing happened in Iran. It was actually a lot of people who helped Khomeini come to power in Iran in 1979 thinking, oh, this guy's going to be different than the Shah. The Shah is oppressive, but these Islamists are going to be different. And actually, our own Jimmy Carter helped overthrow of the Shah and the bringing in of Khomeini to power because Congress thought the Shah was too oppressive. And when Khomeini came to power, Khomeini killed immediately 3,000 of the most active people who were basically fighting to bring those supposedly Khomeini and his cronies into power. We are not learning from history, and unless we learn from history, we are doomed to repeat it. And this is why now is the time for Americans to really stand up and take a stand and start paying attention before it's too late. Now we can do something about it. If you look at Europe, Europe is so far gone because the Europeans slept and did not connect the dots. It is so to resurrect Europe. But in America, we still have a chance to protect and save the country and change the direction. Now is the time for people to get involved.
Talking to Brigitte Gabriel. Her website is actforamerica.org, actforamerica.org. So much I talked to you about it. I wanted to, over in Syria, I know a lot of your focus is domestic here in America, but I'm just curious what you think. I think what a lot of Americans have a hard time, when they just watch the news and they're trying to figure out who's right and who's wrong.
Right.
And America intervened in the case of Libya with military force to get Gaddafi out of there. We didn't necessarily, quote, put boots on the ground, but we used the air, our military through the air to get him out of there when he was eventually killed by some of his own people. In Egypt, we see the rise of the Muslim Brotherhood, and so President Obama said, remember him saying that Mubarak had to go?
Right.
Remember that? The former, and now we see the same thing